Hello, my name is Lev Mazin. I'm CEO and co-founder of AYTM. Today, I have a pleasure to introduce you to Michael Schwarz, Chief Economist at Microsoft and our board member. Michael kindly agreed to share a few minutes of his time to talk about what's happening in the US and globally. Michael, in your opinion, what are the main economic and social trends that we can expect in the near future?
Well, first of all, pleasure to be here. As a disclaimer, I do not have a crystal ball. I wish I did. I think sometimes it's a little bit easier to see things that are farther away than things that are 2 weeks ahead. Who knows if the economy will be on a lockdown in 3 weeks or not. But maybe who cares? Maybe if we are on a lockdown another 2 weeks or another 4 weeks. It makes a big difference for a lot of people, but we probably wouldn't remember 2 years from now if we stayed an extra week on a lockdown. So I think that there are a lot of really important things happening right now and a lot of things not happening. So first, this is a recession like no other. Literally in 100 years, we have not seen anything like that. And the reason is that usually during a recession, there's some kind of crisis of demand. Consumers are not buying, companies are scaling down production. As a result, consumers have even less money. There's a vicious cycle that leads to recession or depression. And that's very much what happened during the Great Depression. This recession is not at all like that. During every single recession, not just on my memory, in the last 100 years, the productive capabilities of the economy remained essentially unchanged. There was just some sort of structural issue that prevented us to be as productive as we could have been. This is not the case here. We suddenly lost technology for safely transporting passengers by air because they can get infected in an airplane. We lost technology for providing a safe meal in a restaurant, and so on and so forth. There's nothing structurally wrong with the economy, and yet we could not do things that we can safely do things that we normally do. And that is why this recession is quite deep. And it also impacts certain sectors in a very, very disproportionate way. I don't think there was ever a recession that impacted travel and entertainment industry anywhere as much as this one, for kind of very obvious reasons. So this is obviously terrible news for sectors where people are really suffering. But it's also good news for the economy. It's a good news for the economy because nothing is fundamentally wrong. Nothing is structurally wrong with our economy. So I expect that as soon as this pandemic is over, I think our economy will start recovering quite rapidly. And to be fair, this is not the view that is shared by all economists. And I myself certainly don't have 100% confidence in this view. But I'm optimistic. And I'm optimistic because as long as there's nothing structurally wrong in the economy, as long as the force of the pandemic, the power of the virus goes away, people will come out and play and the economy will start growing. So there are certainly reasons for concern because first, in the meantime, there's obviously enormous human and economic suffering. But there's also a risk that our economy will sustain structural damage during that pandemic. That even though today there is nothing structurally wrong with the economy, maybe by the time the pandemic is over or by the time the pandemic is at least partially over, there would be some structural damage where firms that could be very productive would cease to exist. The workers would move on somewhere, and suddenly the very productive economic relationships that used to exist would cease to exist, and that would prevent economy from recovering rapidly. But I frankly don't think that will happen. And the reason is that, well, productive economic relationships will not disappear. People still have their Rolodex. People still know who the good economic partners are. So as long as that economic activity becomes feasible again, those relationships will be restarted, unless, of course, say the workers in question found even better, more productive uses of the time, which is also a good news for the economy. So I'm moderately optimistic. So this being said, I think the things that we are experiencing today really have an astounding scale. So let me give you a couple of factoids. So if you look at unemployment claims in recent weeks, well, to say that there was a record-breaking number of unemployment claims is a really, really, really big understatement. We beat the previous record for the number of unemployment claims, not by 10%, not by 20%, not by 50%, not by 100%, not by 500%. Basically, we are 10x the number of unemployment claims relative to the previous record. So that being said, that doesn't mean that this is the worst recession ever. In fact, our unemployment is not the highest ever. There are periods with higher unemployment in the last 100 years. But just the speed is astounding. So the other thing that's kind of really worth pondering about this recession, so first we already talked about the fact that kind of the underlying causes of this recession is like nothing we have seen in the last 100 years. But there's something else that makes it really, really unusual, and that is how global it is. Today, we as a mankind are more far away from each other than we have ever been. You could not hop on a plane and fly to China. You cannot hop on a plane and fly to Russia. The international travel is at pretty much all-time low. It's literally impossible to travel to many destinations. Domestic travel is at an incredible low. So for the first time, people from different countries could not possibly travel to another place. So we are as far as we have ever been from each other. But at the same time, we are closer to each other than we have ever been. Because I am as close to you, Lev, as close to anybody else who might be listening to this video as I am to my next door neighbor. I couldn't come over and see him. So we are all one click away from each other. And maybe this recession will be remembered as the recession where the distance started to die. Back in the early days of the internet, many people expected that internet will bring the death of distance. And it didn't, not at all. But maybe the predictions were not wrong. Maybe they were just 30 years ahead of the time. So I think that one of the things that is starting to change during this recession, our relationships with the rest of the world is starting to change, both in the way how we communicate and how we think about it psychologically. The world became a very, very small place in some ways. The experience of people in everywhere across the globe is remarkably similar. This recession hit every country at very, very similar ways at the same time, like nothing before. There were other pandemics in the history of the world, right? There was the Spanish flu a little over 100 years ago that impacted almost all the countries, but it was spreading slowly. It was very different in different countries. It wasn't something that just unfolded in a matter of several weeks. So there's something else that is different about this pandemic. So it hit everybody at almost the same time, which no other pandemic in the history of the world did, right? So there were many great plagues, much, much worse than this one, but they have never impacted the world as simultaneously as this one. And I think maybe it would bring more global consciousness. Maybe we will kind of realize more than ever before that there's one world, that cases travel from country to country, that there's this, suddenly the mankind has a common enemy, COVID-19, and maybe we'll unify against it. It's nothing like a common enemy. I think that there's something else that's going to start changing here. A lot of things would start changing. And one of them is the way that people consume, the way that people work. So for example, if you look at, there's actually a study that predates pandemic that estimates the number of US workers that could work from home. And well, what we see is that if you just look at job categories, 37% of the workforce in principle could be performing the work from home. But of course, most of those people don't. Very few people used to work from home full time. So recently I did a survey on AYTM, and we found that the percentage of people who work from home today is very close to basically about a third of the workforce. So pretty much everybody who can be working from home can. In fact, there are some people who couldn't be working from home who still work from home, like teachers. So I think that there would be a lot of changes in the way we live, in our habits, in our values. And I generally look at this pandemic with both fear, of course, but also hope. I think that a lot of things in our society that are extremely inefficient, that we might be starting to rethink this time around. So for example, it's really mind-boggling that 200-pound human beings get around in 4,000 pounds shells of metal every day to go from a comfortable table and chair in the home with a window and perfect temperature and fresh air to another comfortable chair and a table 30, 40, 50 minutes away, perhaps without a window. And if you kind of look at it from the other planet, it looks crazy. It looks terribly inefficient. It burns a lot of fuel. It makes the world congested. And it's unnecessary. And most of us work alone. We are at our desk. So the person we are working with, he often may be 10 feet away or 10 miles away. It may not make much difference. So I hope that this is something that will start to change. I think many other habits will start to change. And I think our way of life will start to change. I think we will be perhaps rediscovering ourselves as a mankind. And that's what makes me hopeful about the pandemic. Let me finish with one little factoid. So as schools are being closed, as students start learning online, and today about 95% of schools are closed. One thing that parents are discovering is that 90% find that online learning tools are same or better than what they expected. And I think that that's another beginning of a cultural change where people will be discovering new products, new services, new way of living, new way of learning, and maybe we'll come out happier, better mankind on the other end.
Thank you for sharing, Michael.
Thank you, Lev.
I wish everyone to stay safe, healthy, and optimistic.